the director of this film. He compares James Brooke to Che putting down his doctor's bag to free a foreign country. He set aside his role as a conservationist to fight for a foreign country against his own country, Great Britain.
And also we should just say that he mentioned he was doing his own little Heart of Darkness. In no way does it show in this film.
You're listening to Second Cut. This is the podcast where we talk about topics in film theory, criticism, history, and, when we feel like it, also actual history. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who would never take money to help whitewash colonial happenings.
I'm Sam. I'm the one who can't play the drums or the bagpipes.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one that could definitely do with discovering a diamond mine somewhere.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be great?
I'm sorry to our friend Mark. Is there a worse instrument than the bagpipes and a worse outfit than kilts?
Look, bagpipes are fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the longest time, that unit of the British Army was seen as the most formidable. Because of the reputation that they marched into battle with their asses hanging out.
Yeah, the thing is, we're watching these films. We should introduce our topic as well, if you haven't guessed by the title of the episode, which is essentially like romanticized imperialism.
Yeah, imperial romance. I didn't. It's not like exactly a genre, but it could be.
And we're doing a romance with a capital R of romance rather than a romance. There's a slight thing on there.
Yes.
Hilariously enough,
although mine does have a romance story.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you've got to appeal to mass market. You've got to have romance in it. But it's quite funny that the term romance, in terms of kind of almost like a literary form, was literally like opposed to the novel. So a novel was something kind of based in fact, and a romance was something sort of with a bit more adventure and speculation and speculative stuff like that. So sort of Jules Verne's novels like Around the World in 80 Days, 22,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 5 Weeks in a Balloon were called scientific romances. They weren't called science fiction. That was a later moniker that kind of came around with H.G. Wells and probably even later.
Well, Kieran, let's stay on books here for a second, because that is what all of this comes from. The star of my film, James Brooke, he grew up reading boy adventure films that it made him oh yeah.
He grew up reading boy adventure films, did he? In the 1860s?
Books. But boy adventure books. And a lot of the fascination of colonial romance fiction is faraway territories. A white mediator of sorts. Divided native loyalty. Landscape as like proof and test for the white people in the story, civilization versus savagery, and mystification of like the land, the people. I mean, a lot of these even in more modern, aware, colonial romances where they're trying to be post-colonial. These are just inescapable in Western, mythos around this stuff.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we're kind of basing a lot of this on sort of British colonialism. There will be other stuff like...
Y'all did a lot of it, so it's hard to escape.
Yeah, we did a lot of it, and bearing in mind we are Anglophonic, therefore most of our stuff is going to come from Anglophonic literature and stuff like that, which is going to be based on British imperialism. There will be kind of similar things about Spanish imperialism. I was even initially, before I settled on my film, which is the 1950 adaptation of King Solomon's Mines, I was looking for stuff like of sort of Japanese imperialism in sort of China and places like that. There will be other things along those lines. When we say imperialism, like, we don't just mean kind of the Brits,
obviously there was stuff written prior to this, but like H. Rider Haggard wrote King Solomon's Mines and other African romances. You got Rudyard Kipling.
Rudyard Kipling was the greatest British Empire is the best thing on earth writer in history. Like,
yeah, he's got some nuance to him, but yes.
Yeah, most of his stuff is just like, yay, down with the Indians, all hail the Brits, in the nicest, most unrefined language possible. He's a very good writer, but you also have to take his kind of political views with a massive pinch of salt.
Yeah. You've got Orientalism is a big thing. You know, the exoticism of just the East generally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the Brits went and bombed half in China in the Opium War, 1860. You know, centuries before that, you've got the East India Company, which is essentially run by like 50 blokes out of a townhouse in Amsterdam, and they pretty much changed the entire face of trade and capitalism across the globe, like within about 10 years. It's hilarious.
It's colonialism, but privatized. Like the government gets to say, we didn't do that. That was
And then we'll get onto things for the Belgian Congo, which is literally just the Belgian king going, I want an empire, but everyone's already got one. What can you do? Okay, we're going to claim the Congo for Belgium, but all of the companies are actually going to feed all the money to me. Definitely, I'm not hinting. It's literally him just killing millions of people for private money, essentially. So it's like the Europeans and we've not really done the best of it, which I think is probably why we're now kind of able to call out other people going, this is what you're doing, we know we've already done it. This is the situation we've landed ourselves in.
Colonialism? You don't know the meaning of colonialism.
I was going to say, considering the British Empire, I think they worked out it's the second largest empire of all time behind only the Roman Empire or something along those lines, you know. Like, Alexander the Great didn't get that big. The Greeks didn't get that big. The Persian wasn't that big. The French, the Dutch, the Brits are second in the list. Only the Romans topped it. Which I'm surprised we didn't do anything on Roman. All of ours have kind of a British sort of trend to them. But, hey.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's easy to pick on the Brits because of that, their effect on the modern world. On the film side of things, so you transition from books into film, and like an early Lumiere brother film was like, I think they shot it in Vietnam. It was footage from Vietnam, something like that. You know, that's a French colonial piece. So like back then they're making kind of travel logs of colonial areas. The Sheik in 1921 was Orientalist erotic fantasy. The Lost World in 1925. Tarzan the Ape Man. I think you have a few Tarzan films prior to 1932. I
mean, there was a silent version of King Solomon's Mines that's now lost. And I mean, again, half the thing, I still remember Mark Kermode going that half the point of like the James Bond movies is like, this is the 1950s and 60s, where it was not as easy to get around sort of, you know, international travel wasn't really a thing. You mostly stayed in your own country. So you were showing off the world, you know, you got to show people these places, and this is quite why a lot of kind of the sort of imperialist colonialism like literature did quite well, because you essentially got to travel to exciting places that you would never go to under any other circumstance.
Yes, it's a way to show off these exotic locales and their strange ways and customs, and almost like a sideshow attraction, you know, for those stuck in grey old Blighty.
Yeah, and over time after, you know, the 30s, 40s, decolonization is happening, you know, throughout, you know, Africa and Asia and I guess Southeast Asia and Oceania. You get more revisionist or complicating films over that time. We watched The African Queen, you know, films like Zulu, Passage to India, Out of Africa, you know, I think even like Hotel Rwanda, like that's a film we're seeing the consequences ultimately of like the colonial events. The Last Samurai. I was going to say I didn't catch you. Or The New World.
Yeah, I didn't catch you, but I'm thinking The Woman King as well from a few years ago.
Yeah,
it's definitely a response to this kind of film and literature.
Yeah, Avatar, you know, we talked about that in our chat. Like it's a you know, a mythicization essentially of this stuff that is sympathetic to the colonial, anti-colonial side.
That's essentially Pocahontas or Dance with Wolves, but in space, you know, and that kind of story has been told at so many different times. You know, the white man goes to, you know, live with the, you know, in quotes, savages, you know, becomes one of them and ends up fighting his own people.
That definitely will not be a plot
better way of life.
Yeah, so there could be, adventure films or historical dramas, biofilms, things like that all kind of build this, I don't know, I guess storytelling, framing. I mean, it's a few different things, but it is colonial romance with story attached to it.
Yeah, it's an attempt to pass off, or I mean, there are times in these stories where they do critique imperialism and colonialism, the awful things that happen, but it is in the same way using it for a mode of fiction which essentially goes, this is so adventurous and exciting that we can ignore everything else going on. You're using it as an excuse to entertain, essentially, for the most part, and quite a few of them also go yay for colonialism. But the excuse for entertaining, I think, is what people would have issue with, because they go, no, these are very serious subjects and we should not be using these for entertainment purposes. In the same way that people might have, feel badly about kind of horror films or based on a true story, something like Zodiac, for example. Somebody will go, this is a horrible thing to have happened. So many people lost their lives in savage ways. Why would you make something like that for the purpose of entertainment? And I think it's the same argument from a racial standpoint and mass genocide standpoint for these texts as well. As much as they are interesting and have their good points to them, we do have to appreciate both angles.
Yeah. Ultimately, it is all spectacle. Like, I think especially, Kieran, for your film, like a lot of it is about the spectacle of the otherized land and the otherized people, showing audiences, here's what it's about. It's exciting. And, something to think about when looking at films about like real life or real life analog imperial films is how are the land and people treated? Is it shown to be inhabited and politically complex? What is the moral theater and landscape of all of those people? How are they presented? Things like that are important to whether or not a film is pro or unintentionally pro colonialism and imperialism versus anti. And I think the big thing about change over time, and Pocahontas, that's a kid's movie, but like the difference between that and how that might be told in the 19th century is like, how much do we see of the native groups and their practices and beliefs and that kind of stuff? Now, obviously, you could do that with disdain as well, but
so talking about this kind of subject of I think there's colonial revisionism, I suppose. Films that kind of present the other side and then kind of try and claim, colonialism wasn't all that bad. I thought an interesting one to dig into would be the 1938 film The Drum, which came from Alexander Korda's London Films. So London Films in this period was probably the biggest kind of British studio around at that time. Ealing and Hammer were around, but they weren't major players yet. At least they wouldn't be for another decade or so. They're really the biggest name in town, in terms of like British filmmaking. And they in an earlier film they discovered a 13-year-old Sabu, this young boy from India, essentially found off the streets and kind of brought into the world of acting, and they discovered, he's got natural kind of charm and charisma. We can make something of this little kid. And basically, they wanted a vehicle, to place him. And thought, let's do something with India, because we've got this little Indian boy to put in our film now. They're looking at like various novels, to adapt and or things kind of with a similar kind of subject matter. They've done. They were going to do The Four Feathers in 1939, the A.W. Mason novel, and his work also inspired the story for this film for The Drum. So essentially, it's the story of warring kind of Indian princes in the northern provinces, around where Pakistan is today. That's where the Khyber Pass is. one of them gets assassinated, and his usurper basically goes after his son, who's the heir to the kingdom, and the young Prince Hazim has to work with the British, the British soldiers led by Captain Carruthers, and they basically team up to fight back against this evil Khan of Tokot, and along the way, strike up a friendship, and this young prince thinks, oh, maybe these colonial oppressors aren't so bad after all, because this particular British man is quite nice to me, and he
teaches me how to play a drum.
Let's not think about that. Yeah, let's not think about what he might want out of this arrangement. I completely trust him.
Let's don't think about what that little redhead boy's going to grow up to do either. None of that.
Yeah. So this is, at the time, this was particularly praised as an early example of a Technicolor film in Britain. Unfortunately, the version I watched online, which is the only version I could find, which was in any fit state to view and still in English, was the black and white version. So I've seen snippets of the Technicolor film, but they're all seem to be dubbed into other languages. So yeah,
Jacob, please, did you find the Technicolor version?
As
yeah,
intended.
I saw it on Tubi. It was really nice.
I don't think we have Tubi over here.
Did you?
So.
Oh. No. There are several versions on YouTube, and it looks on the Internet Archive as well. But yes, it was either the black and white one, which you could watch in English, or the Technicolor version, which you could watch in bad quality.
Well, let me tell you this. It's very bright, and the version that I got a hold of, I don't know if it came from like VHS or some degraded film. It made me question for a second, wait, was this put into color in post? And no, it was shot, like I remembered it was shot in Technicolor, but like it looks really good if it was full Technicolor still, like the version I could watch.
I mean, I do wish I could see a restored version of this in Technicolor, like on a big screen.
Absolutely.
That would be amazing. So I think just seeing like a not as good version, like it's still got across, it's like there's scale to it, and the way the scenes kind of put together.
And anything in old school Technicolor, like 95% of it just looks good.
Yeah.
Can we go back to like proper vibrant colours, please? Yeah. Rather than having everything so dark.
Yeah, and I think with the Indian, with the Indian setting, all that, those kind of bright coloured fabrics and everything like that, I think it would look stunning, I'm sure.
Yeah. Shout out to Pearl for using that Technicolor style.
Yeah, absolutely. I will mention that. I think it just felt looks passable as India. Yes, they did send a second unit to do some kind of just establishing shots and stuff in India. The majority of this, much to the annoyance of Zoltan Korda, who's the younger brother of Alexander, the producer on this, much to his annoyance. Alexander said, "No, you can't take a full film crew to India. It's too expensive. Don't be silly." So they shot most of this in Snowdonia. So the kind of passes in Wales in this version, which, funnily enough, is exactly the same thing they did in Carry On Up the Khyber, which I watched about 6 weeks ago. And the similarities don't end there, actually. Both films are about warring kind of Indian kind of factions with the British stuck in the middle. And one side is trying to prove that the British aren't as fearsome or competent as they often claim to be. So, difference is in Carrying Up the Khyber, they're trying to prove that the Scots do wear pants under their kilts, so they're not as brave as possible. Whereas in this, they're just generally using British weapons essentially to fight back against the British. It's kind of how it goes in this. I mean, I think one of the first things you see in this is, kind of a messenger kind of bring back to, the British soldiers, like, they've got machine guns. No, they've got machine guns. They know how to use them. It's like this moment of, oh crap, maybe our colonial power the empire isn't quite as kind of bulletproof as we first suspected. Maybe what happens if these nations who took over centuries ago fight back? What are we going to do then?
Whenever I see that, I'm always reminded of Blackadder Goes Forth when they're like, "We're not used to fighting wars with the opponent has guns. We much prefer fighting wars where our opponents are armed with dried guava, fruit, and grass." You know.
Yeah, that line, I heard it and instantly thought, "Oh, okay, so we're being on the nose about all of this."
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this one does come at it just point in history. I mean, I'll come to the reception later, but so it's 1938. So we're 9 years out from Indian independence. So and the kind of the independence movement is gathering pace at this point. Obviously, it would it would lose a bit of momentum, during because around come from World War II as well. But it had been gaining traction for quite a while. Gandhi was doing his thing through the 20s at least. It's interesting that kind of less than a decade out, they're still kind of churning out kind of stories like this that basically kind of arguing for the virtues of still being in power in India. I mean they've it was like the jewel in kind of the empire's crown essentially at this point. It was like the one to look to in terms of just what the exotic things they brought back from continents, and the new kind of foods and spices and jewels and everything, and just this idea that the empire's kind of reach kind of stretch to Asia and to Africa and all around the world. But it was kind of starting to fray a little at the edges.
Yeah, Sam.
So I think the kind of
I think the drum is like if you in the 1960s made a movie about a black guy who becomes friends with a Strom Thurmond like figure, and it's like, yeah, we do need Jim Crow actually. It's really good for us if you think about it. It is.
I know. Yeah, I mean that's the difficult thing about this. I think it's all very technically well put together, and kind of works as a story, I suppose. I don't have any issues with the performances as such, but yeah, it's just the underlying message kind of thing. It just makes you feel so uncomfortable now, and just it just looks a bit kind of desperate. So the actors in this. So I've mentioned Sabu, but then you've got Roger Livesey and Raymond Massey, who have both gone to star in a few Powell and Pressburg films.
This is why Sam knows about this movie.
And that, yes, basically. Yeah, I was like, I know those two
The internet
guys.
likes to confuse Michael Powell's The Edge of the World with my movie, but...
Oh yeah, The Edge of the World is a very different
Very
film.
different.
That's set in the Scottish Highlands, and it's like rural island.
Still about
life
the British
in
going up
Scotland.
there, and the English attacking, and into the middle of nowhere. But
yeah. So obviously, there are things obviously that haven't aged well at all in this. I mean, the opening has Roger Livesey, a very distinctive plummy English voice and kind of face, kind of in swathed under like a fake beard and a turban, basically, and he's basically doing a bit of like espionage for the British, pretending to be, just an Indian kind of street merchant
like
or
James
something.
Bond becoming
I think
Japanese.
That's slightly dodgy, but I suppose that's kind of it's part of the story. I suppose he's not meant to be convincing. It's like then it's part of what he does. That's part of his role in India. But then later on you have Raymond Massey, a white Canadian who's actually meant to be an Indian prince and convincingly like Asian, and that's like no, not good. But at least he didn't do the accent. So that would have, I think, killed the whole film for him. He just does his normal Canadian accent. It's like, let's not question why this Indian prince is Canadian.
yeah, I've got a thing.
I actually think he's really good in this. I think he's a real kind of charming, kind of devious, kind of villain. I mean, kind of some unsavoury kind of stereotypes, but I think he's got an interesting, kind of compelling character in his way. But it's a bit like Jafar from Aladdin.
I've just got memories in my head of The Wind and the Lion, if either of you've seen it, with Sean Connery playing Mulai Ahmed A. Rasuli, a Moroccan Berber rebel and anti-imperialist leader. And it's like, you could not, like, different times, and I'm not saying that, I mean, it's Sean Connery, he's going to act the hell out of it, and I seem to remember him doing a very good job, but...
Yeah. No, and there's quite a few white British actors browned up in this. Basically, most of the speaking roles, if they're Asian characters, they're not always played by white actors. There are Asian and Indian actors in this, but they're kind of background kind of people that like the dancers and the people like filling out the crowd scenes and stuff. I'm not sure if any of them have kind of particularly prominent roles. Maybe like darker Europeans might, but. It's not the best in terms of representation.
Directed by Sir D.W. Griffith.
Interestingly, though, it does kind of have. I mean, it's sort of part of the exoticization and kind of Orientalism, I suppose. But I think it's a fairly kind of respectful portrayal of like Muslim kind of religious and kind of cultural practices. You see them praying, and they mention that you're part of their daily kind of routines and prayer rituals, and there's references to various things you do and don't do under the Islamic faith, and that's not like seen as like a figure of ridicule. It's like it's emphasising the difference between the Brits and the Indians, but it's I think I was surprised actually that they kind of just let that be kind of as is, just represent it as a fact, and this is different, but we're just going to present it without comment, mostly. So I found. Hang on, where's it gone? Found a critic, Andrew Pragasam. He kind of gave like his brief summary of it. So he said, released just at the cusp of a decade that would see the British Empire crumble after the twin blows of World War II and the Indian independence movement. The film was received very differently in both countries. In Britain, this unabashedly jingoistic ode to empire was warmly received, while in India riots erupted in Bombay and Madras against what was perceived as propaganda.
Perceived as propaganda.
So apparently in Britain, and so Britain and the USA, they thought, this is a real good technical achievement. Yeah, good old-fashioned story, of the British being great and doing what they do and everything like that. And in India, it's like, we're trying to get away from you guys, and you're kind of trying to set us back with this obvious piece of kind of, just. Do
you think it was just, deliberate propaganda, or do you reckon that the creators were just kind of like oblivious?
It had to be.
I don't know. I mean, I'm surprised that they thought releasing it in India would benefit them at all, really. I mean, they could just release it back home and just maybe the British subjects of India might not have been made aware of the film at all. But it was seen in India, and riots did happen in certain cities in response.
I mean, look, Sam, you gave the historical context earlier. Like, we're 9 years, however many years out from Indian independence. Like, They knew at the very least that there were tensions in the area as they were making this movie. Like, whether it's intentional propaganda or not, it's certainly not oblivious or ignorant of like major happenings in the empire.
I do wonder though that obviously it comes out. I mean, the novel's written in 1937, but the film comes out in 1938. Obviously, next year the war starts, and although Neville Chamberlain did quite a lot of like flights back to Germany, to the Eagle's Nest with Hitler, and kind of thought he could calm it down. I wonder if there is a bit of an air of let's rally the troops in a way.
Well, considering the massive part that India played in like the British war effort, it's just they're they're essential. It's like, for that part of the world.
So I wonder if there's. I don't know, and I think this is why it's actually incredibly interesting to go back at a lot of the older films that completely get neglected, rather than the ones that kind of make the headlines. Because let's be honest, if we weren't doing this, none of us would have gone and seeked this movie out. But it does make it interesting from a historical context. I wonder how much of it was even if it's just at the back of the mind of, let's release it in India to show how great Britain is, so that if war does break out, we have look, we'll protect you, come protect us, we'll fight for you kind of thing going on. I don't
be
know.
Like the good little boy and not like the evil bad guy.
Yeah.
Well, I think
I don't know.
Yeah. Sam, I don't want to step on if you're going to get to it, but seeing that it's part of a colonial trilogy, pretty strong evidence in one direction, I'd say.
Yeah. And I think London Film, they were well up for doing kind of soft propaganda kind of films that kind of not necessarily direct contracts from the British government, but they're kind of, I think they were given indicators that what they'd like to be seen, it's kind of but by the British public, to keep morale up in kind of uncertain times. I mean, as you were saying, Jacob, it's very on the nose. Literally, very, very early on, you have Carruthers, saying, "My India is the frontier." And it's like again this idea of, you think like the old, the old West, kind of,
the old East,
the white man making inroads. White man making kind of the push into like, First Nations kind of, country, and just this idea that we can explore and lay claim to cultures that are seen as inferior to us, that definitely weren't, that were just seen as different to us, and therefore they're different. They've got different practices to us, and therefore
white people don't know about them. Therefore, they don't matter or don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and he kind of early on, he's very patronising towards towards the young prince. He says you'd like a big war, wouldn't you? And might as well translate that to, don't you emasculate me, boy? I'm British. It's it's very much like. Just hanging on their fingernails, trying to hold on to these kind of territories that are just starting to basically have enough of us. I mean, one of my favourite moments in this, again, it's not uninteresting. I don't think everything in it's bad. It's just the overall message isn't great now. But I love to see towards the end, that kind of social gathering, where they're watching like some traditional like Bhangra dancing, and Carruthers is kind of saying, "Oh, yes, I'm enjoying it. It's strange entertainment, but I'm enjoying it." And they're kind of comparing like the cultural ideas of what cultural entertainment is, and quite laboriously talking about attitudes to gender roles, in different societies, and kind of, saying, "Oh yeah, women are free where I come from. You see, they're slaves to you," and kind of in early 20th century kind of Britain. I mean, women hadn't had the vote for that long. I'm not sure if you got much leg to stand on. But then kind of you have like the Bhangra dancing, but then they go outside, and then the Highlanders have arrived, and they're doing their like Highland dancing outside, and it's like that kind of contrast between. We've both got a weird kind of, to the other side, a weird kind of cultural kind of things, like a bit of an exchange going on.
Using bagpipes, which are a great musical kind of instrument. Obviously, everybody on this show loves the bagpipes.
Yeah.
It is just the worst thing to listen to when you're watching a movie, is atonal.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about the drum in this, so the young prince, becomes friends with the young drummer, part of the army. And then you have like a drum soundtrack to all the action, basically. But it's quite interesting how different the drums sound. So the drums for the British backers, like getting momentum, and so kind of, I suppose, amping everything up, and making them seem more kind of powerful, formidable force. Whereas you go over to the the other side, when the when the forces of Prince School are coming, and that's like very very much the drums mean it's like the orc armies, in Lord of the Rings, isn't it? It's just very much like a building up tension, and this scary thing is coming, down the road, and making them seem more other and kind of threatening. It's like the same instrument but kind of used in different contexts, and it's like playing with the sound effects slightly is kind
I'm
of
still thinking now of
message.
is it Peckinpah who wanted all of his guns to sound very slightly different in the Wild Bunch? I think. Obviously, go back and listen to our villains team up episode where we did the Wild Bunch.
Yeah, I did find one contemporary review, British review, that wasn't that complimentary.
Really?
And it said it was no more than an anachronistic and jingoistic fiction harking back to boys' own paper popular fiction.
Yes.
So.
Yeah,
which is basically what we
I want to read an
so,
Indian guy or gal reviewing this movie in the 1930s.
I don't think we need to. I think we know exactly what they're going to say.
Yeah. I did try and look up, but that was the oldest kind of snippet of contemporary I could find on this. When it was a Brit, but I said not complimentary. One of the more interesting things I found online in spot this actually was a great site called the Colonial Film Database. Basically, it archives like all the kind of colonialist kind of depictions on film over the years, and some real interesting writing on there about kind of how we can read them today, and kind of how kind of just different ways you can view these kind of pieces of media for different contexts, essentially. But essentially, to talk about, I'll kind of skim this, but the British were established as protectors against warring native factions, with Carruthers as the benign English gentleman who teaches Azim clemency when they first meet. Representations such as this suggests the myth that imperialism involved good colonizers with a mission to introduce Western notions of civilization to barbaric territories. I'd like to feedback that the Carruthers does mention later on. He goes off on a rant about the British bringing law and order and peace, to countries in their empire, essentially, which is an old kind of lazy argument, basically, which doesn't kind of consider the other side and kind of what oppressed nations might think about these strangers coming into their country and planting a flag and saying that they belong to them now. Colonial Film Database continues, the bagpipes are used many times in the film to signify strident nationalism, which qualifies in the image of peaceful native and British coexistence. But interestingly, the Scottish regiment is depicted as working class, as in opposition to the figures like upper class Captain Carruthers, whose view, it is suggested, of the Empire is more civilised, conquest with decorum, not violence.
Right.
And that, I think that class through line does kind of really run through this, and I wanted to almost to dig into it more. I think it would be more interesting if someone in like the army kind of drumming kind of segment, the bands essentially, the following the army around. If we obviously Joe is that kid, isn't it? It's the little ginger kids, it's kind of we follow. But I think if we spent more time with them, it might be more interesting as kind of a contrast to everything. Because usually it's the two warring Indian princes and their retainers, and it's Carruthers and his wife essentially. They're like the main characters.
Sam,
which kind of essentially means that we're left with like the goods the Indian characters on the, in quotes again, that the good side are basically end up supporting their oppressors just because a couple of them are quite nice to them or not as horrible to them as the other Brits.
You bandage up a kid and suddenly the entire country is on your side.
Yeah.
I love the part in this movie where the bad guy and the good guy, who's dressed like Indiana Jones and James Bond in a really crisp white jacket. They discuss the dancing rituals of the Indian versus British world, where the Indian women do it for the male gaze, but it's not as sexual as British co-ed dancing. It's so weird.
Yeah. Which makes it, and if they're advanced that argument, I do want to know who they think the Scottish Highland dancers are dancing for. Then
it's
for the women who aren't there, they're in the skirts, like.
But like later in my movie, there's also a discussion of the sexual practices of the Brits versus the native people. So it's interesting the film bothers with it, but it's also weird it's coming from the bad guy. Like, what is it saying about that practice?
I know. I mean, I think that's why what makes him Ghoul more interesting, compelling villain.
By the way, obviously could not come up with a more on the nose name for an antagonist.
It's a bad guy, Bhadgui.
Badgui, the Kilgore,
Yeah.
But he is kind of charismatic, and he's got a point. Essentially, I think he wants the Brits out full stop. I mean, he wants to rule, as much as he can himself, but I think he wants the Brits out full stop as well. So he's not unsympathetic in that regard. It is an interesting film. Like I think it's very well made. I wish I had seen it in Technicolor. Some performances are good. I think Roger Livesey is good. I think Ren Massey is good. I think Sabu has got clear kind of charisma, from early in his career. I mean, I can know him from the 30s Thief of Baghdad, and a few other kind of films he do like in the following decades.
Like Black Narcissus.
But
your Powell and Pressburger. Come on, Sam.
No Powell and Pressburger connection there, which again has questionable depictions of colonialism. Yeah, it's funny, but yeah, it doesn't get into enough kind of a balanced argument about the whole British controlling India thing. And
that whole thing,
I understand why. I understand why the Indian audiences who saw it got so mad at it and decided to set fire to stuff. I think
maybe the boy Prince, played by Sabu, doesn't know about like the starvation in Bengal, because they're on the other side of India, so maybe he didn't hear about that.
That's true. Yeah. But I would never thought a kind of a war drama film from this period would have so much in common with Carrying Up the Khyber. They're basically the same story, but completely different tone. But it's interesting, but very much representative of an empire in its kind of death throes. Just trying to. Just get one final bit of fake news out there.
Excuse me, it's not fake news. They are alternative facts. Okay,
and it's actually just direct fiction.
Of course.
Like it'd be one thing if they were trying to pass this off as biographical. That would be funny.
Yeah. It's acknowledging kind of the world as it was at that point, but using their own characters and even their own. I mean, the Khyber Pass is mentioned, and we know which region of India it takes place in, but all the places they mention are kind of made up kind of towns, I think. So, it's a version of reality, but it's film reality.
I also like the map it has at the beginning. Again, in Technicolor, like it looks like the Indiana Jones map. Whenever it's like, here's...
because you go from like a globe to a map, and it kind of keeps kind of fading into it. Which actually again reminds me a bit of A Matter of Life and Death, which goes from the universe to the Earth to.
By the way, I think we do need to start a second thing where every time Powell and Pressburger comes up, we just everyone takes a drink or something like that. We should have just a drinking game in general. Powell and Pressburger should be one of them.
Okay, all right, okay, yeah. Powell and Pressburger for me, Doctor Who or Hammer for you.
We'll come up with something for Jacob. Some random Christian
for Jacob. One thing I've just thought of, actually, I think this is the earliest film where I've seen text in another language kind of translated into English.
That was funny.
In real time, like for a phase. Yeah, so you have like Urdu, I think it's Urdu scripts, and then kind of fades, and basically meant to understand that Carruthers has been in India for a while. He can read the language, so he's looking at it, and then it translates to English before our eyes. So it's kind of interesting. They got that in there.
I like the visual implication that like he can't think in the language that he reads. Like he still translates it to English in his own mind.
Yeah.
Welcome to being a Brit, where we're not used to actually having to speak other people's languages. We just tell them to speak ours.
Even the people that live on your island.
Yeah,
indeed.
All right. Yeah. So let's move on. In time, we're going. In our time, we go forward by about a decade, but in film time, story time, we're going back a few decades. But yeah, again, it's Brits in a colonised nation.
This is great because this is like technically, realistically, like the second appearance of H. Rider Haggard, because he appeared briefly for Nosferatu because one of the major influences on Dracula and kind of vampires at that time was She, which is one of the Rider Haggard novels that came out afterwards. Again, set in the middle of Africa with some very questionable representations of people, quest novel kind of thing. And it'll probably come up again because when the Odyssey comes out, Rider Haggard wrote a really funny sequel to the Iliad and the Odyssey, essentially setting Odysseus kind of arriving in Egypt just before the 10th plague of Egypt, which was really messing up, called The World's Desire, which I've got, and I picked up ages ago and I read about a year ago, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so interestingly weird.
He wrote like Colonial Song of Achilles, where like now it's let's make it gayer. He was like, now let's make it African imperialist. Kind of,
yeah. And it's just like, what if they lived and it arrives, I think it is Helena Troy. I can't remember the exact details, but I'll be rereading it before, along with having to actually get through the Iliad and the Odyssey before July. But yeah, King Solomon's Mines, which when this was pitched, I just went, okay, we've got to do a version. And unfortunately, the silent version has been lost, because otherwise I'd love to do the silent version, because you get as close to kind of the origin as possible. And also,
Kieran, is there blackface in the silent version, or did they get actual black people?
I don't know, because it's now lost.
Okay.
And this is technically there for the third version, because there was a version in the 30s as well. But then I'm like, this version, but it won 2 Oscars, got nominated for Best Picture, and it's got Deborah Kerr in it. Like,
I hope the original was vaudeville, and it was like do. There, he's like 7 feet tall. Do.
As far as I know, so King Solomon's Mines. I mean, Rider Haggard had a hell of an interesting life anyway. But King Solomon's, H. Rider Haggard, he kind of, he grew up. He was the great nephew of he had an uncle of a naval officer who was knighted Sir Vernon Haggard. He was a fairly wealthy family. Essentially, kind of didn't do the best his grades, and his father's like, this is an absolute disappointment. Went to his naval buddies, can you send him off somewhere? He ended up in Africa again, which is kind of, there's a lot of similarities with Joseph Conrad, who will eventually write like a lot of Heart of Darkness in a way is actually kind of a response to Haggard.
Guys, did any successful British nobles like do well in school, or were they all just really average? And
no, essentially, Rider Haggard didn't do that well. The James Bond guy, Ian Fleming, was a bit of a failure at a lot of stuff. Yeah. Churchill got packed off very early.
The establishment are very good at failing upwards.
Yeah. Is there something to being mediocre, and so you try extra hard to try to be successful in spite of that? I don't know.
Yeah, essentially what happens is you're fairly rich.
You just have lots of money.
Your father's disappointed in you. You get shipped off somewhere else, do lots of war kind of for the Empire stuff. Later on, probably write some stuff and therefore get very well known as a result of it. And that's kind of just how it works. But there's weird things like, H. Rider Haggard was in, so he'd got through naval officers and stuff like that. He was transferred to the staff of Sir Theophilus Shepstone, and he was in Pretoria, which is now in South Africa, when the British annexed it. He read out the thing from the British, Empire going, we are annexing this. He hoisted the Union flag, and then several years later, when there were peace treaties, because he'd been living there for several years, they had all the peace talks at his house. It's so weird, genuine, groundbreaking, world global diplomatic things. This guy who wrote pulp adventure novels in the future, it was all around him. And kind of as a result of all this, when he eventually went back to England and did some stuff, he was known as an Africa expert, despite the fact he'd been in Africa for 5 years and that's it. But this is why kind of a lot of his early stuff is kind of set in Africa. This is why Solomon's Mines, this is why she is all kind of African based. It's because he did actually have some knowledge of kind of the stuff that was going on. So yeah, had a very interesting life. And King Solomon's Mines came about essentially because in 1883, another novel had come out, which was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And you have kind of this, it's an adventure novel. It's for young people. You've got now a population which is becoming more educated, because I think there was an Education Act in 1870, 1871, something like that. So you're having a more sort of lower middle class educated populace rather than just straight higher tier, who kind of very much are enjoying kind of your adventure, your daring do, your daring, all that kind of thing. So Treasure Island becomes very much a thing. And apparently him and his brother on a train were discussing it, and his brother bet him 5 shillings, I think it is, that Rider Haggard couldn't write a better version. So apparently he went away and in about 6-7 weeks wrote the initial draft of King Solomon's Mines. He'd already written 2 novels that were, nobody's heard of them, put it that way. But comes up with King Solomon's Mines. And if anyone hasn't read it or knows the plot, you have seen the plot, because it is every adventure film and story from then on is just a retelling of King Solomon's Mines, essentially. There's somebody in a foreign land. People go and we've heard there's treasure out there in the middle of nowhere. In this case, it's the lost diamond mines of King Solomon, and they go out through these strange lands.
Who, by the way, was famously in Central Africa.
Yeah,
not, Palestine.
Yeah, so they go through these strange lands. They meet tribal people. One of them may happen to be a king in disguise. There's shooting dangers and all these things. They discover a lost kind of civilization there that's better than everything else. There's there's skeletons in tombs. There's doors falling shut on them. In the actual novel, they have to do 1 or 2 puzzles to find the diamonds. They get out through kind of water, the rivers that flows through the canyons and all this. If this sounds like every Indiana Jones movie, there's a reason for it. If there's elements of Tolkien, there's a reason for it. If there seems like there might be elements a bit of Heart of Darkness of going into this kind of place in Africa where stuff's going on, there's a reason for it. All of this is essentially originated from King Solomon's Mines. Tomb Raider, Uncharted.
So Tolkien grew up reading this.
He was a massive Rider Haggard fan.
Tolkien was born.
Cool. Put it this way, Jacob. Think about
as well, wasn't he? I believe.
Yeah, and around this time. And Jacob, think about there is a somebody in disguise who returns to become the king of a people.
Mind blown.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, definitely not. We have to go on a quest, and there's jewelry involved and all this kind of stuff. So it's hilariously enough, one of the things that the novel's most famous for, that this version cuts out. I don't know if it's in other versions. Bearing in mind now that when this came out, it was there was hilariously enough. Apparently, there was loads of publishers protesting it because they're there's so much violence in it. and yet everyone else is. There's a part where essentially like a kid gets kind of almost ripped apart, but all the kids reading at the time are like, this is the really good bit, and all the kind of publishers are like, this is the most appalling thing anybody's ever written, it's vile, we can't do this. And everybody reading is like, this is what we actually want, it's the blood and guts,
Kieran, you've described a film or a book that sounds a lot more interesting than the film ends up being for me, despite how beautiful it is.
Yeah. But all these things in everything's essentially cliched, but one of the really interesting cliche bits that this film misses out, and I was waiting for it, and it never turns up, is essentially there's a bit in the middle where they've kind of got the shotguns and stuff, but they need to convince the uncultured savages, of the wild plains of Africa, that they have superior knowledge and godlike powers in order to get them on side, essentially. And they go, what can we do? What can they do? They're going to kill us at any moment. And they go, hang on, wait a minute. And then they go out and they consult all their charts and diaries, because some of them are men of science and learning and scholarly stuff. And they go to these people and go, it's like, in 3 days' time, the world will go dark. And I will command the world to go dark. In 3 days' time, I shall make it happen. Essentially what's happened is they've lined up and they know an eclipse is coming. And so they go out and they go, behold, the world goes dark for this amount of time, and the eclipse happens, and all the people cower, and they lift it again, and now they're on side, essentially. Also in the book, the little skirmish that's at the end of this for like the kingdom thing, there's an entire like battle, fight, war thing that happens in it. It's completely cut out of this version of the movie. There's so much stuff that's actually in it that isn't in this particular version. One thing that is in it is Deborah Kerr, because essentially in the original, it's a boys' adventure novel. Why would we have girls involved? Ew. But obviously for kind of mainstream audiences years later, you have to have female star power. And also so you can get some romance out of it. You can get a kiss.
And she was the star name in this, wasn't she? That she's who you put on the poster.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, another Powell and Pressburger link, because she did several films with them.
Yeah, they wanted apparently for Allan Quatermain, who ends up being in like 15 other novels by Rider Haggard. And by the way, this kind of kicks off like the Lost World genre. So a lot of Rudyard Kipling stories like Tarzan and stuff, very much inspired by this. The Professor Challenger, Arthur Conan Doyle novels, including The Lost World, which is where essentially King Kong gets its iconography from, is
Jurassic Park 2.
Is directly ripping off this. All this stuff. Conan the Barbarian, a lot of it starts from here. Even things like Mouth of Madness, where you go off to somewhere strange and find a lost civilization. It's pretty much all coming from Solomon's Mines. I've lost my train of thought. What was I on about?
Well, the book sounds really interesting, Kieran. Tell us about the movie.
The movie, essentially... that's it. Deborah Kerr's in it. They wanted to cast Errol Flynn, but he wasn't available to play Allan Quatermain. That's how I got into Press and Challenger. So they wanted to cast him, but obviously he wasn't available. I think he'd just done a couple of things, and so they couldn't actually get him on board. So they eventually went to cast Stuart Granger, who does a good enough job. He looks like a cross between Christopher Lee and Jimmy Stewart.
That's a perfect description.
And every time I looked at him, like, is Christopher Lee with Jimmy Stewart's hair?
And he spends every opportunity he can with his top off.
Yeah. And near the end, he's got a shotgun, and he looks like Bruce Campbell in Army of Darkness. I just saw that, and I sent you guys a picture of the two side by side, going, I see no difference. And I'm going, was there? It's exactly the same shot, including scaring off the savages with a boomstick. I do wonder if there was definitely a link from that. It wouldn't have surprised me if Sam Raimi got that entire thing from this kind of thing. The trouble with this one, and the reason why they cut so much out, is because they have to add a female lead in. So much of it is focused on how women can't cope out here when it's meant to be rough and tumble.
Oh my god. That is way too much of the movie. It is the worst.
Yeah, it's just kind of driving home this thing. It's essentially an excuse to get Deborah Kerr, like, falling into water and getting wet and soaked and drenched, and that's kind of the reason for half of it.
I wondered why I couldn't remember so much of it, and it's because that is a lot of it. Instead of her being capable of doing puzzles or something.
And then halfway through, they find an excuse to give her a trendy 50s haircut, probably the hair she actually has at that point.
Yeah. Cut off your wig.
She unfortunately spends too much of it as the girl. Is it Willie from Indiana Jones 2? Rather than Marion Ravenwood from Indiana Jones 1. She gets to be Marion by the end of it, but kind of only under duress.
The best part about that scene is she cuts her hair, and then there's a little comedy bit where they can't hear each other yelling, "It's time for dinner. Did you cut your hair?"
What?
It's so pointless.
It's so bad. And the trouble is, because there's so much of this, and like it starts off well, you know, there's bits that are like, and then it just drags on with not doing enough. I don't know if there's budgetary issues, but the trouble is, most of this is filmed on location. Yeah. Most of this is filmed in
multiple
Africa.
Countries.
They went to the locations to shoot.
So they did a John Huston. They did what he did for African Queen. Then we're not going to make it easy for ourselves. I wonder if the director of this was really into hunting as well. I mean, that was John Huston's main reason for filming Africa, so we could do some hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you go on Wikipedia, it goes, filming in Africa took place at Murchison Falls in Uganda. Astrida is in Rwanda. Stanleyville, which is now Kisangani in the Belgian Democratic Republic of the Belgian Congo, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's bits in Kenya, Tanganyika. You know, was a colonial territory there. Like, they went to, like, what is now, like, 4 or 5 different things. There was some shots in Sitting Bull Falls in New Mexico. Like, you've gone globe-trotting for this.
Yeah.
And admittedly, this is why it won, like, stuff for cinematography and colour. Because it does look gorgeous. The trouble is, they spent an awful lot of time on that, and admittedly, the novel does spend passages on this because, again, this is in the 1880s, and part of it was to bring people to places. It was kind of like travel writing to a certain degree, you know. So there's elements of that still in there. The trouble is, there's so much of it traipsing around going, that's a snake, watch out here, hack it to death, when it could be doing adventure stuff.
A really crap fake spider crawling up a leg. I mean, why was that so bad? Or why did they get a real snake but not a real spider? I don't understand that particularly.
Yeah. I think what happened is they went, we've gone to all these places in Africa, let's show it off. And that's fine, but you do wonder if they'd have gone only to half of the amount of places in a completely different continent and shot a lot of stuff on sound stages back in England. And I mean, like, you've got the money. If you've got the money to Africa, you've got the money to create, like, spend more time in your caves doing a couple of, like, Indiana Jones style puzzles before he was invented. But there are a couple of bits, like the scene in the novel, I can't remember it that well because it's been a couple of years since I read it, but it was a bit extra, and there's a couple of, like, they do find essentially the mines because in this version they get into the cave and about 4 minutes later they're swimming out of it again. It's just completely pointless.
They walk in, there's like a bin full of jewels, and
there's a rock fall. And then
why do the jewels look so bad in this? They look like costume jewelry.
Look very cheap.
Put it this way, Indy spends more time in the Well of Souls in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark than they do here in actual King Solomon's mines. It's pathetic.
The plot of it is Deborah Kerr's husband went missing, and so they need to go look for his dead body and find the mines. But that doesn't end up being it's both the journey itself is the real thing, and then also what it ultimately culminates in had nothing to do with the point of the story and just kind of pops up.
So, like, in the original, and kind of in this, there's kind of three plots. The main one is find King Solomon's mines, do they exist? The reason to do this is, essentially, Deborah Kerr's husband, or just a character in the original, has gone missing whilst looking for them. So they're going to go out and see if they can find him. If he's alive, great. If not, we can settle essential legal stuff back home and everyone's happy and we have our answers that we wanted, you know? Whilst doing this, they obviously are kind of accompanied by and talking to lots of the local tribes that are there. And one of them happens to be following them. And when they eventually... I forgot his name, which is so bad. But when,
Bopa?
Yeah, we'll say that. And then when they find this kind of land in the middle of nowhere, there's a load of tribespeople there. And it turns out he was the former king. And so, like... right at the end of the movie, when about 5 minutes to go, they have a little scuffle and he becomes king and everyone's happy. So you kind of have three plots. Again, in the novel, there's a huge battle that happens where they get like Allan Quatermain kind of like predicting kind of we'll flank them over here, and there's huge like fight scenes going on because the whole thing was it's meant to be big and exciting.
Like the Battle of Five Armies?
It's like, again, this is why Lord of the Rings, like, Tolkien loved this stuff, because it was big army fights, you know? Like, he knew what he was doing. The trouble is, this is just, it's not here. And this is before we get on to any of the colonial stuff, because obviously this is very much the white people know better. The white people help restore the tribespeople to their kind of rightful places and blah, blah, blah. We're better than them because we have the technology. They're scared of our technology.
It's always particularly uncomfortable with a character like Quatermain, where basically saying, this white man knows how to be African better than the Africans. You know, it's like so patronising. So he speaks all the languages and knows everything about, you know, the savannah and, you know, how to interact with the animals and these different like subcultures and tribes, and it's just deeply uncomfortable.
I mean, to be fair to Haggard, he wasn't as bad as somebody like Kipling. Yeah, there are times when you know that he treats them quite well. I think at one point in like an early draft, like one of the characters wanted to take on like a tribal wife, stuff like that, which again is it's not great from a lot of angles, but at least he's trying.
At least he has like active kind of black characters, you know, with their own kind of stories to tell.
Yeah. It's one of these things where it's not great, but it's attempting to start in the right direction, if that makes sense. And, you know, it's not great. He didn't have the greatest things ever. And again, there are theories that kind of Conrad would write Heart of Darkness, which we'll be talking about soon, kind of as a way to respond against it. So there's lots of things in Heart of Darkness that feel similar to kind of Haggard, you know, going into the explored depths of Africa. You know, there's again in Heart of Darkness and in King Solomon's Mines, there's is this racist, is this not, kind of allegations on all the sides of it. But I think Conrad was very much more kind of traumatized by what he'd seen in the Belgian Congo. Hilariously enough, a lot of this movie is shot in the Belgian Congo, which anybody knows anything about that, it's literally just somebody going, "Yay, we're going to slaughter millions for rubber." Well,
like the whole deal with Quatermain is he and the people going into unexplored Africa, they're like, I mean, to an extent, reasonably nervous to be dealing with these unknown people. Maybe because you're invading their land to try and extract their resources, and it's justifiable that they might be hostile towards you. But like with the Belgian Congo, and this movie just completely ignores it despite shooting there, like people were getting their limbs hacked off. Human life was, turned completely into what can you create for the King of Belgium to enrich him, because he privately owned the entire land mass.
It's interesting because the drum kind of was very much kind of propaganda piece. When we'll get to it, Edge of the World is very much kind of steeped in the colonialism. King Solomon's Mines is almost it's very much in the background. It's not kind of very often overtly mentioned, but it's the kind of colonial imperialism is almost just like a cloud hanging over it. that you can't get away from. So in that sense, it's a slightly different tone. You can enjoy King and Solomon's Mines just as an adventure story, but as soon as you go imperialism, you go, yeah, that's a thing. And so it's like I again read it for the first time a couple of years ago. I enjoyed King Solomon's Mines. It's a great fun read. Like it is, you can kind of enjoy it just as a thrilling piece of adventure. In the same way that you can kind of read something like Jane Eyre, and kind of slightly and go, oh, this is a great piece of world literature, despite the fact that the reason that Jane can eventually marry Mr. Rochester is because she had like a relative die overseas and leave a fortune, which was probably got on the back of slaves. This is never brought up, but this is, you know, the accepted reason why this happened. So it's like, do we now cancel Jane Eyre? Nobody's ever going to cancel Jane Eyre. So you can read this and you can kind of watch this to a certain extent and just go, fun adventure through, and we're going to have this kind of thing. But there is a cloud that always hangs over it, and that makes it interesting from that point of view. And the fact that, like, there are versions of King Solomon's Mines continuously being adapted. You know, this is not just like, oh, we stopped years ago. There's like 7 or 8 different versions that have been done over the years. It's slightly mad. There was one a couple of years ago. You know, it just keeps going on and on. There's a new one. There's a new one. There's a new one. There was like 2 in the 60s. There was one in the 70s. There was a version in like 2008, something like that. You know, and the books still sell. You know, the King Solomon's Mines was one of the bestsellers of the Victorian era, and H. Rider Haggard is up there as one of the best-selling novelists of all time. His stuff's still selling, and people are still adapting his work, and the influence is still there. But also the colonial oppression cloud is continuously hanging over it. And as soon as you kind of... If you go in kind of not knowing when it was written and stuff like that, or not knowing, you know, the original thing like this, you can kind of watch this and go, there's a little bit, but it's kind of, you know, passed off, blah, blah. And then you kind of start pointing it out and it becomes slightly glaring, more obvious. It's just kind of hiding in the background. It's almost like trying to hide itself, like camouflage.
Yeah.
But as soon as you point it out, you go, this is an issue. Yeah,
you can kind of enjoy this on face value, enjoy the spectacle, essentially the safari footage, which is what they have in here, and just generally take it, for like some of the survival stuff and some of the kind of adventure stuff. But then, kind of the characterization kind of leaves a bit too much to be desired. And then the more you think about the wider implications of the story, the more you start to feel a bit uncomfortable. It just depends on how you want to receive it as a story, really, how much or how little you want to think about it.
Like, a pretty major aspect of the story is the train of black people who carry all of their stuff for them, who they might refer to as baggage. There was some term they were using to refer to the people who carry their stuff. Those people are essentially, like, they aren't slaves, I'm sure, because I think that hadn't the British outlawed slavery by 1897, but... how are these folks distinguishable from slaves?
Fun fact, they outlawed the buying and selling of slaves for like ages, but it was not illegal to own a slave in Britain until 2010. It was just one of these quirks that just never got fixed. So it's like, technically, like, if you somehow acquired a slave without buying or selling one, like, you could own a slave in Britain until 2010. Not the British Empire, that was outlawed, but there's some weird things. I guess, considering that kind of Quatermain is very kind of sad at losing one of his like friends at the beginning of the movie, I'm guessing they're paid. Probably not that much. But considering how much he's getting paid, probably enough to convince them to go.
I think.
Yes, we'll choose you.
I think there are several references to they're all going to be rich at the end of it. They're all kind of banking on a portion of the plunder. When they do find the mines, I think.
Yeah. Very quickly before we kind of leave this one off, I just wanted to bring up kind of the Oscars it won, because the reason why I chose this one is because it is an Oscar winner from 1950, and again I think it's interesting to go back and see these Oscar winners that nobody remembers won anything. You know, we know the big ones, and these ones are like, oh, what? So it won for best cinematography in color. Against, and the ones these year were Annie Get Your Gun, Broken Arrow, The Flame and the Arrow, we've got 2 arrows here, and Samson and Delilah from that year. Hilariously enough, you will know the black and white from that year. So black and white that year was won by The Third Man, and the other nominees were All About Eve, The Asphalt Jungle, The Furies, and Sunset Boulevard. Imagine being in that lineup and having to choose, like...
Yeah.
I feel like I know this one color, but like I think it probably also speaks to the tenor of the time, where the film that won best color cinematography, it was about that it was shooting tourist footage, essentially. You know, kind of treating the landscape in the colonial aesthetic sense.
Yeah. So it won for editing. And hilariously enough, the ones it was up against were All About Eve, Annie Get Your Gun, Sunset Boulevard, and The Third Man. So it did beat The Third Man in that. But then for the winning for Best Picture, it was up against... so it got nommed against Sunset Boulevard, Father Bride, Born Yesterday, and All About Eve won Best Picture that year. So again, there's like... Even if you're not like a massive like cinephile nerd at this time, you've probably heard of a couple of those. Like, and this film managed to sort of hold its own fairly well against a couple of them. So like, and especially from, I mean, probably less from the editing point of view, or there are a couple of bits where it's quite fun. So maybe there's just some really badly edited movies that year. But it beat out Third Man for editing.
That seems like a mistake.
Yeah, but welcome to the Oscars, you know? Everything's a mistake with the Oscars.
I mean, this is an incredibly standard movie. Like, it is beautifully... Like, the landscapes it's shooting are beautiful, so it frames and photographs them well, but it just does it in such a boring documentary way. Like, I don't know.
And again, thinking about when we did the Disney documentaries, like, this is the time of that happening, you know, so we've got to take that into account. But yeah, it's an interesting film, and interesting I think in several contexts as an artifact, but is it outstanding? Nah. Is it fun for Deborah Kerr? Maybe. That's about it. And is it fun to have somebody that looks like a cross between Jimmy Stewart and Christopher Lee? Also, yes.
To tell you one thing, Deborah Kerr's got a great scream on her, isn't she? It's a proper scream queen scream.
Well, yes, and at some point we will do The Innocents and do Deborah Kerr's Finest Hour.
Absolutely.
Nice. All right, well, let's move on to one of the not finest hours of the 21st century. And
because both
that's a little film called...
Both of our films, to an extent, can kind of fall back on products of their time kind of excuse, but... Yeah, you shouldn't be releasing
things
like this in this day and age, really.
Yes. So here we have looked at the history that Edge of the World was allowed to emerge from, and it's insane that this movie was produced the way it is, but it makes sense the more you look into it, and I think also look into the people involved.
I was going to say, please describe the movie and what happens, and then reveal the date it was released in. Because if anyone that doesn't know, they're going to go, what the hell is going on?
Well,
so what happens in this
guys,
movie, Jacob?
Yeah, well, maybe I want to start a little bit also with the real life. So if you're like me, you had never heard of this fellow named... Sir James Brooke. James Brooke was a British guy who, much like apparently the guy who wrote King Solomon's Mines, was an unexceptionable rich kid. Born in India, finally sent off to English boarding school at 12, before he ran away and then went back to India, basically. He was raised as a colonial gentleman. He wasn't in the aristocracy class because he didn't, own land, but his dad worked for the British East India Company. He was very rich. So James Brooke, when his dad dies, he gets 35,000 or 30 or 35,000 pounds, which in 2022 dollars translated to $3.7 million. It might be up to 4 now. This very young guy, unexceptional British fellow, gets a lot of money. And because he also loved adventure books of the 1840s, prior to the 1840s, the early 19th century, he loved those books. So he was like, I'm going to buy a boat. It's going to be an armed boat, and I'm going to go do cool adventure guy stuff with my boat and my friends and my guns, and I'm going to expand the British Empire. That is the real life story of Sir James Brooke. How familiar were you guys with British Borneo and Sarawak prior to this?
Not as.
Oh yes, we had definitely done him in history class. You have to understand, Jacob, that we essentially like to focus on anything we did really well. Okay, which essentially,
I mean, y'all did
British
Southeast Asia pretty well.
School, yeah, but the British history education consists pretty much of 3 things, and that's Battle of Hastings, the Tudors, and the First World War. Now that's it.
Anything
outside of that,
we don't tend to cover the oppressive empire or the slave trade or anything like that, really. So ask the question. I was aware Borneo was one of the areas in Southeast Asia we subjugated, along with Thailand and Singapore and Hong Kong, places like that, But no, I'd never heard of this guy per se, or and I didn't know what his deal was. So.
Awesome. Yeah, okay. I mean, you guys just have way too many people to learn about, so that's understandable. But, just having a vague understanding of, now, which every single island did we own? Yeah, I could see how that would be problematic.
Or did we claim to own? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sorry. Owned on paper that was recognized in the West.
Only by us,
Yeah. Well, yeah. So pretty much, James Brooke, he was a rich white guy who took over a large chunk of an island because he had guns. So that's pretty much the factual story. And the movie is about this very handsome man who comes with just his cousin and his nephew and a love and passion for the jungle, where he becomes, Avatar, Dances with Wolves, John Smith from Pocahontas. He goes completely native, and look, I don't know how else to describe it. That is, in terms of trope, what he is doing, and that means that he is now anti-imperialist against the British and fighting a noble war to bring peace to Southeast Asia and his rule as the head of Sarawak.
It's like, do you have the white savior? Yes. Do you have the noble savage? Yes. You kind of tick everything off. It's amazing.
Do you also have the backwards, evil, cruel savage? Yes. You have him as well. You need a villain.
Yes. Do you have Merry from Lord of the Rings? Yes. Let's be honest. Everyone saw him and went, "Oh my God, it's Merry!"
Do you have Ralph Ineson doing his great vocal work in a mediocre film? Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So this film, I found an article from Dayak Daily. That is a Sarawak, I don't know, I guess paper, online publishing, news thing, whatever. The White Raja has official backing from the Sarawak government. That was the original name of this film, by the way. They changed it to Edge of the World because people in America are stupid and wouldn't know
what was the original name?
Means. White Raja, which was his title. That was James Brooke's official title, the White Raja of Sarawak.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There have been some stupid titles in the world.
Yes. Especially in 2016, during a signing ceremony in September 2016, Chief Minister Abang Johari said, "White Raja is an initiative by the state government to promote Sarawak as a natural studio and a result of negotiations between the Brooke Heritage Trust, the film producers, and the state government through Sarawak Tourism Board." So, this movie was made to tell filmmakers, come shoot your movie in Sarawak. Look how pretty it is here. The white guy who used to own all of this land in his personal fiefdom, his family supports making this movie, and so does the tourism board of our country, who would like your money, white people. Please come here. That is what I got from this press release.
I mean, again, like Cold Mountain, half shot by my old lecturer, was kind of done to like, look how pretty Romania is. Please come shoot stuff here. So it happens. Like,
yeah.
What do you think? Everyone goes to Morocco? Like,
look, I'm not going to say a bad word about Sarawak for trying to get money to flow into their country. That's a good idea in the world that we live in, unfortunately. You know, it's just really weird that the state government, these film producers, and the descendants of the former British white ruler of the country, are all collaborating together in the 21st century to make this colonial imperial romance film about a handsome man who, gosh darn it, just loves him some nature and some jungle.
I mean, it's not that odd that like the descendants of the guy would want to make a movie which makes him look great.
You're right. That's not odd.
I can understand. Yeah. That's like saying it'd be odd. It'd be like saying, you know what the members of Queen should do? Let's make a movie about Freddie Mercury where it shows all his warts and all and actually portrays him in a slightly negative light. No, that's never going to happen, is it? Nah. Sorry, Sacha Baron Cohen, you're out.
But that was one of Shakespeare's main roles, wasn't it? Because he was patronised by Queen Elizabeth, so he makes all of her descendants, kind of all her family line, look great in his plays, but. Other people, pretenders, as they were seen, to the throne as demonic and monstrous figures, so yeah.
Strange that.
Yeah, look, odd is the wrong word choice because yes, that's exactly what you expect, but like, it's weird to not just say, our family did some questionable at best stuff in the past. Yeah. Don't think too hard about it. Here's a movie about how much he loved this place that he lived in. And he was definitely not just a useful pawn in the British Empire. As they would say in one of your movies, it's actually us, the kings, that are the kings, and the British are the pawns that we use to fight each other. Let's just completely ignore the guy who took over India to put up a government puppet state over, an entire subcontinent. Didn't happen. Ignore that.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely not.
Yeah, I mean,
so I found
all three.
No, nothing.
I was going to say all three of the films kind of use these kind of genre tropes, kind of almost cast a veil over kind of what it's essentially about, which in all three cases is the British in a country that don't belong in, kind of for the sake of strip mining kind of resources and oppressing a people, But let's not think too hard about that, because that'll spoil the fun you could be having with these stories,
Well, I mean, Sam, we were both talking about the rest of history earlier, and I'm sure that you remember that pretty much every time they kind of mention sort of explorers ending up somewhere normally from Europe, the parallel they draw is like kind of a sci-fi story where they kind of beam down to the foreign planet, that kind of thing. And so, like, sci-fi's taken a lot from these kind of colonialism stories into itself. And as we've been doing this, I was thinking kind of the nearest you get to sort of essentially white major kind of Hollywood movies viewing it from the side of the oppressed, it's kind of alien invasion movies. That's realistically the opposite way around.
Yep.
So the opposite of what we're saying is that H. Rider Haggard, seen from the kind of viewpoint of the African tribes people, is Independence Day. This is what we're now saying. A line I never thought I'd say. Anyway, please continue. That was a thought that just ran off.
So I do want to get more into James L. Brooke, kind of the facts of him, but let's get into the mythos first, because mythos is very much something the director of this film, Michael Houseman, is concerned with. He wrote an article in Movie Maker about the making of this film that, like, he really feels like he's writing his own little Heart of Darkness in this article. Because nobody was around to, like, shoot it the way they did for Coppola. So he's putting it himself into this online magazine or whatever. And he says some hilarious things. He compares it to most films that dive deep into the jungle to capture a certain authenticity or unexplained truth, from Fitzcarraldo to Apocalypse Now, come back with equally epic, nail-biting making-of stories. So yeah, he's putting himself directly into that tradition with the way that he discusses this film. He also compares James Brooke to Che Guevara. He compares James Brooke to Che putting down his doctor's bag to free a foreign country. He set aside his role as a conservationist to fight for a foreign country against his own country, Great Britain. That is how the director of this film discusses James Brooke.
And also, we should just say that he mentioned he was doing his own little Heart of Darkness. In no way does it show in this film. Like,
no,
you could watch this and have no inclination that Heart of Darkness was an influence on it at all. And I hope the people that are listening to this audio only caught the severe amount of sarcasm in that. I was trying to keep as straight a voice as possible. God, it gets bad near the end.
There's a review, I can't remember what source it was. It might have been The Guardian. It discusses how, like, he's trying to do Malick and really failing. Like, he wants so badly to be making Apocalypse Now, and boy, is it not, like, in any way visually interesting or revolutionary, other than the fact you shot it on location. So much like the last movie we discussed, good on you. It looks pretty. I'll give you that.
Here's the thing. I just looked him up on Wikipedia, okay? This is his 7th feature film, okay? He's done a load of music videos, including a couple. He did Sexy Back by Justin Timberlake. He's done Selena Gomez, so he's essentially mainly a kind of music video director. The only other feature film that has a Wikipedia entry for him is a film from 2003 called Blind Horizon. Have either of you heard of it?
No.
Here's the thing. It looks like a generic kind of conspiracy thriller kind of thing. The White House, blah, 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 blah. I've had to look up ratings. It's got 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb, 31% Rotten Tomatoes. It's that kind of movie. But the cast, Val Kilmer, Neve Campbell, Sam Shepard, Amy Smart, Giancarlo Esposito's in it, Amy Smart. It's a stacked cast, but it's like Wikipedia does not give you any kind of ratings, which tells you how bad it is. And I now want to watch it because I just that's a decent cast in 2003. Like, this is good, and I'm like, it's going to be the most awful movie ever, you know? So, and the fact that he'd done 2 movies after that before doing Edge of the World shows you how hard it is for him to collect money in order to shoot things, because he hasn't had a decent successful career making feature films. He's had to go into music videos.
Well, and he called, at the beginning of the article, he said, somebody asked me, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And he was like, I don't know. And then it goes to 3 years later, I made this movie. And it does sound difficult. It sounds difficult because you're shooting in a jungle with a large production crew. He says many of the crew did not make it until the end, falling victim to the perils of the jungle, broken bones, dengue fever, and being driven insane. And yeah, dude, you go shoot something in the jungle, people are going to get sick. People are going to be in precarious situations. The boat's going to go down the river real fast. You're trying to make this sound like those stories of The Exorcist was shot on a cursed film set. No, dude, it's things happen in the jungle.
Do you think he just walked around carrying a DVD player and a copy of Hearts of Darkness, Apocalypse Now behind the scenes?
Does no one who's thinking about shooting it in the jungle watch Hearts of Darkness anymore? That gives you an idea of what to expect.
Well, he watches it as aspirational.
Yeah. I'm not making a true movie if I haven't lost half my mind and subjected people to several life-threatening situations for the end of it. The trouble is, Coppola was going mad, but he'd also shot Two Godfathers and The Conversation before doing Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
You have done a Shakira music video. Okay, he's done Timberlake and a couple of other people, but there is a slight difference in terms of movie making kind of stage. You could have told me anybody in the world directed this movie and I'd said, yeah, that sounds about right.
Look,
there's
honestly,
nothing here.
I think any person with a decent understanding of how to take a photo, so your average influencer or person with an Instagram account, could shoot the things that make this movie attractive visually, and it would not be indistinguishable from the movie's cinematography, because so much of it is about, look how pretty this real jungle is. And it is. I will give them that. Nice place, Sarawak.
Yeah.
Not really the point.
Yeah, this movie, again, whenever I think of stuff like this, I think of One Cut of the Dead. And when they ask him, how would you describe yourself as a director, the character goes, fast, cheap, and average. This is exactly the directing style of this movie. It is so bland. It's so unremarkable in any way that, even when you get into kind of the things of trying to show somebody coming to understand that, the powers that he works for and live for are actually not great and will betray you in the end, and all these kinds of things, and they're noble pursuits of trying to show somebody kind of unbrainwashing themselves. And for today's society, this is a thing that, is still relevant. Yeah. But when it's shot this kind of, I won't even say mediocrely because everything's fine, but it's just kind of whelming. There's nothing kind of that grabs you. At no point did I see a shot that I go, oh, I actually really like that shot. That's really creative. Even if there's no attempt to do something unique, even if it fails. There's no kind of Last Jedi thing where even if you don't like The Last Jedi, he took massive swings at it and you've got to give him credit. There's nothing like that here. It's just purely functional. And that, I think, makes it more depressing than it should be, than if it was ambitious and missed.
Yeah.
My rant over.
Yes. This was produced by the Samuel Goldwyn Company. This has people you have heard of. I haven't heard of Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. I had to ask you guys specifically about him, but he's in things. Yeah. If you know who he is, he is a person.
He's a fairly big
man, but he's a handsome guy. He is technically British. He's British, and he discussed in a Collider interview. He discussed Brooke, and he says he's an unusual figure. Because he became the Raja of Sarawak, but never actually became a king and was constantly fighting. That's just patently not true. like, so the whole deal with James Brooke was he was given the land by the Sultan of Brunei. We see that happen in the movie. And then he fought the enemies of Sarawak to build and expand his own personal kingdom that he personally was in charge of. It was not under British power. It was his thing, and it was for his own personal glory to be like, look, I'm a great citizen and expander of the British Empire. And that's important to know, because the film is going to say the exact opposite of that.
I will say also, Jacob, you have seen Jonathan Rhys-Meyers because he was in Alexander, which we mentioned earlier, I think, with Colin Farrell.
Makes sense. Also Irish.
He was younger then, obviously, but I don't think he was like one of the major characters in it, but he was
even more
handsome. So obviously go back and listen to our Alexander episode.
And that would have been one of the few films where he gets to be Irish, because all the Macedonians were Irish and that.
Yeah, because Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell's disappearing a lot of stuff today, you know.
Yeah, so the film opens with Brooke. He arrives on the land of Sarawak on a tiny little boat, because he came from his giant schooner that he purchased with his $3.7 million inheritance. And they don't want to show you that part. Like, we do see the boat, but it's never like, and yes, this is exactly his boat. Like, it's a giant armed ship that he bought. And like, if you or I could buy a tank, you know, and drive that around, that's what he did. But no, they show up in this tiny little boat, just the four of them, these innocent Brits who just want to wander around and look at the flowers.
Just a traveler.
Yeah. You know, the beginning of this movie, it paints Brooke like he is a naturalist, like he's a scientist of his age. He was not. James Brooke was a soldier in the British East Indian Company Army. So he was in a private army where he fought in the Anglo-Burmese War and got injured really badly. And so he quit soldiering because of that, and he just started rich boying instead. And that's when he began to sail around. He used his little bit of military experience to help him be a better, I don't know, head of sailing on a boat. And they wander into the jungle, and there are the evil, well, not evil, they're the noble savages, I should say. And that is the Dayak, I believe. And so he becomes friends with some of the native people, and there's a pretty, young woman there, and he's like, oh, I'm going to make eye contact with her, so you know that we're going to have the romance plot throughout this film.
Ironically, by like taking essentially a native wife, although this is something that was quite often done by kind of the explorers and kind of the traders of these kind of hundreds of years ago, it ironically makes him more like Kurtz, who does have a kind of the savage wife or whatever it is. Yeah, in no way referencing Heart of Darkness at all. Definitely not.
Yeah, I don't think this movie knows that its protagonist is Kurtz. But yeah, he becomes friends with all of them. And then whenever he shows up, so he meets the two princes. There's the one prince who his name's like Badrudin or something, and he's young, and he has homoerotic moments with James Brooke that are never quite reciprocated by James. But they are definitely implied, and then I think discussed as love of some sort later in the film on the prince's end. And then there's the other prince who is older and has a sinister bad guy facial hair thing going on. And those are our two kind of main Sarawak figures, along with the girlfriend wife. James goes to help the bad guy conquer the poor, helpless, other Sarawak people. I don't quite know who they are, but he has to be the good imperialists to be like, hey, now I'm not going to let you behead those people, you headhunters, because there's headhunters on the island, and there were actual. Here's a good thing about this movie: there were actual native people in this film. There were indigenous Borneo people used throughout the cast, so that's cool. The director said some of them are still headhunters. I don't know how true that is. And I'm pretty sure the whole headhunting thing, while it did happen, obviously it's portrayed in the film as like a thing that he doesn't like. And that's kind of a thing about his regime, was like trying to stop headhunting while also taking advantage of the people that did use headhunting. But headhunting as a practice, it's one of those things that's like in the colonial imagination of like terror against settlers. And when you're talking about conquered areas, like, you know, how much can I blame them for going after the people who are trying to take over their land? The people like James Brooke, they may do something bad, but that doesn't mean they are bad people, because the British also starve millions of people in India. So,
you know, as I was watching this and the other two films I watched last night, for some reason I kept thinking of Apocalypto, the Mel Gibson movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know what, it's just something about kind of the colonial aspect of kind of, you know, who is the good guy, the bad guy, are the British that bad, are they good? Is it tribes people that they're also kind of not exactly all nice, friendly towards each other? Are they antagonists purely because we need an antagonist? Does this paint them in a bad light, historical, actual, all that kind of thing? Which is all just completely apocalyptic. I think I was also thinking about it because I missed the eclipse in King Solomon's Mines, which I'm fairly sure is where he nicked that from. But yeah, just kind of, where does all that kind of lead? We were talking about the headhunters just then. I'm like, yeah, you know,
well, like
maybe there are
the indigenous Mexican, like, you know, sacrifice stuff that did exist to an extent in the colonial imagination. It gets played up as this, you know, barbaric practice that they're constantly sacrificing people and eating their hearts, and like, well, no. That's not how it happened.
Of course, our noble ancestors, the Romans, would never ever sacrifice anybody or burn anybody alive. It's not like you know. Obviously, bearing in mind that kind of we got democracy and all these kinds of things from there. It's not like we ever, you know, our kind of ancestral overlords would ever have burned Christians like candles. No, definitely not. We were completely pure in every way. Definitely.
You know, at least headhunting is personal, whereas like the Bengal famines were really impersonal and done like on paper. Like there's a distinction between two levels of atrocity there.
Well, I mean, even in this movie, Ralph Ineson. Yes, Ralph Ineson's in it, and I'm kind of happy to see him try and bring something to this, and sad that he had to be in this at the same time. You know, he's there, and the kind of kid characters like permission to go upriver and kind of help, you know, these guys out because there's fighting and feuding later on in the movie. And he goes, no, we're not going to do that. We'll just let them kill each other and pick up the scraps, and then we can set up our coal mines and exploit the place. You know, one savage tribe is the same. And
yeah.
So the Brits weren't great either.
They play around the edges of coal in the movie and don't actually get into the coal extraction portion. No,
it's a plot point, but it's a plot device, not a plot point. You know?
Yes, when it should be a plot point, really. But you know, anyway, so he stops the fighting, which was some kind of civil war. I'm not clear on what happens in the movie, but he goes to the Sultan of Brunei, who's like, cool, you are now the White Raja of Sarawak. And I'm like, okay, I don't get why. He stopped his friend from killing innocent people. I don't know. I don't understand what's happening.
The trouble with this film, well, there are many things wrong with it, but to do the story actual justice and to get into what it needs to get into, and by the way, the guy ruled like this section of Brunei for like 25 years, and we see about
his family did for 100 years.
Yeah, and we see about 3 of it. So this shows you how much is missing out. In order to do it just, it should be the life of him in this country. Therefore,
Yep.
it should either be a miniseries, or if you're doing it in a film, it needs to be at least 2.5 to maybe 3 hours to properly do it justice of kind of the constant evolution and the way he has to maintain power and all these things and see it and against kind of British kind of interest and stuff. The trouble is, what it should be is 2.5 to 3 hours. It is like 1 hour 35, 1 hour 40, but feels like the length it should be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's not a long film, but it feels so much longer. But also managed to feel like there's so much interest stuff that could have been in here. It's like, well, let's just focus on all the not interesting generic stuff of this story. Just not dig into. Let's just not give any even a second thought to anything that might provoke any kind of debate or discussion.
Kieran, I think you're referring to doing a Michael Jackson. You stop before all the really bad stuff. So what really happened, Brooke put down a civil war that helped the Sultan win his side of it. So he was like, cool, now you're the person in charge of this gigantic area of land. And, it's like 2 years later, he has built huts now, and he lives with his wife, and he doesn't have any more British people. His British cousin and nephew and all that, they've gone home, and he's just surrounded entirely by people from Borneo, and he is now in a battle against the Bad Prince, because the Bad Prince keeps raiding his area with the snake people. And this is when Ralph Ineson shows up and all the other white characters show back up, the British folks, so that they could say, wow, things have certainly changed, but, now we are back here, and inconsequential ultimately to the story, because what the story is about James Brooke realizing, I don't need you, Britain. I don't need you back home. I need you to actually stay out of my area where we are sovereign, and we will never let you have control here, is kind of what the rest of the movie is about.
Pretty much.
Yeah. There is the battle, which, Sam, you pointed out in our chat, and I took a note on the line. He says that to have peace, we must first have war. And then he has a monologue about you need to do more than love the jungle. You also need to love the blood of the jungle and embrace both sides of it. And it's like, okay, so pretty much the film's thesis is white British folks are the good side of the jungle, and then the bad side is the savage nature of the people that you need to murder to solidify your rule and keep your subjects safe. His friend, who's like an Asian guy wearing a very modern shirt, who's his translator, I think he gets his head cut off later. I wasn't fully clear on who it was, but I don't think he shows up again. I think his name was Subu.
Isn't it Mary that gets his head cut off?
There are multiple decapitations in the final stretch.
Yeah.
That too, yes.
Then you get to the final thing, and all I'm thinking of is just, and I've pulled up the transcript now, I will read you an actual quote from Edge of the World. In war, things get confused out there. Power, ideals, the old morality, and practical military necessity. Out there with these natives, it must be a temptation to be God. Blah, blah, blah. The good does not always triumph. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, now we get to him not realizing that actually his main character has become Colonel Kurtz. It's like, it goes the whole way, and it's just like, oh, I'm trying to do Heart of Darkness Apocalypse Now without doing Apocalypse Now. It's like, but you're just doing Apocalypse Now, and it's worse in every way. You don't understand the movie you're trying to rip off.
Nope. That's because the goals of it are aligned with the Brooke Family Heritage Foundation, or whatever it's called.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot who's paying for the movie.
Yes, the goal is to preserve the legacy and put out the narrative of the official life of James Brooke, like the materials you might read about L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. It's about not letting you know about all the bad stuff, which, was so bad in 1851, the British Parliament had like a whole hearing about it where they discussed like the crap that he was doing there. So this group of people he was accused of killing, he explicitly said about them, the natives who were addicted to piracy and robbery are exceptions to the general rule. Spear and sword compromise their only weapons. They have no muskets or firearms. They never use them. From their great dread of firearms, they can be kept in subjection by a very small body of men. So he says that about the people that he is being accused of massacring in British Parliament. They are not threats to me in any way, but I'm still going to kill them. So he would, how like governments will say, oh, these people are terrorists, now we're going to go after them. He had that, but with pirates. And at the beginning of the movie, him and Mary are talking about like, oh yes, we need to meet some pirates. Won't that be fun, Charlie from Lost? And I don't think they ever actually meet any pirates. Now at the end we have these Breakfast Club close cards where they just kind of tell you the rest of the story. They yada 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 in about 6 frames. So Brooke reigned for 26 years, embarking on a lifetime crusade to end piracy, slavery, and headhunting. So that's what his goals were in the official narrative. Let's don't think too deeply about how he would classify those things and to what ends. For his bravery fighting the pirates of Borneo, Queen Victoria knighted Sir James Brooke in 1847. This guy who exists outside of the scope of the British Empire and isn't reliant upon them or the steamship Nemesis at all. He was knighted for some reason. And then in 1854, he defied British colonial ambitions. Brooke was tried for murder by parliamentary inquiry. No, he was not. He was investigated by the Brits in Singapore, who dismissed the charges. So when the next panel says he pled neither guilty nor innocent, that doesn't make any sense because he wasn't charged. So, I mean, it is technically true. He said Britain had no power to judge him as a Raja of an independent Sarawak. The thing is, he also held British titles. And part of that debate that I pulled up was also about, can he legally hold 3 different titles, including being an independent sovereign from the UK? And guess what? A lot of people landed on yes.
Well, the answer to that realistically will be yes when it suits us for him to still be British, and no when it suits us for him not to be British so we can do something about it, The British are amazing at suddenly deciding somebody is British or not. There's always a thing with Andy Murray, the tennis player, that when he won something he was British, when he lost he was Scottish,
Oh, poor Andy Murray. Well, the great thing about that vote was it was like 230 to 217. So there were a lot of people who were like, maybe we need to rein this guy in a little bit. But they never did. So James and Fatima, they were joined by local rights. They had 1 daughter. I guess she was real. I don't know. I didn't know anything about her outside of this movie. In 1857, James formally recognized his illegitimate English son, renaming him George Brooke. I don't know anything about him either because he doesn't matter. Because after James died in 1868, which I found the original Gazette announcement of that, the London Gazette. So yeah, I found some really cool firsthand sources discussing like the things that he was being recognized for back home in the UK. Like, dude, this guy's awesome. Look at all he's doing for the Empire.
And are they far more interesting than the film that got made about him?
Well, no, because they're really dry and boring. But
yes.
Yeah. After James died in 1868, his nephew Raja Charles, who's the blonde Charlie guy running around in the movie, he governed Sarawak until his death in 1917. And then his son, he had a funny name, I can't remember it. He ruled until the Japanese invaded in World War II, a century after James arrived, although I mean, that's not really true because he's the one who ceded the land back to the British in 1946. It became a British colony and formed the Federation of Malaysia in 1963. So a lot of yada, yada, yada about, for 100 years, these random white people with a lot of money ruled a large chunk of the island of Borneo. And that's cool.
Kind of glorious, very nice protectors of, defenders of the faith, that kind of thing. Never did anything wrong.
The only violence was necessary violence. And yes, he did smear himself in like black, like he's going to go kill Colonel Kurtz. But like, don't think about it. Don't think about that too hard. It's cool.
This is the end. Dum, dum, dum.
I mean, look, was it scary to be standing in the deep mud surrounded by crocodiles if you're the people making this movie? Yes. You didn't need to do that. You could have shot this on a soundstage for much cheaper, but that would run against the goals of the film, which were to make something to sell the country of Borneo as a place to film your movie. So, yeah, I mean, this movie, I found it. It was fascinating to me. Golly, just what an insane movie to make in 2021 about how awesome the White Raja of Sarawak was, because the people making it are his descendants, and the tourist board of the country that he was in charge of, made by a guy who thinks that he's Coppola.
Welcome to filmmaking in the 21st century. Yeah, it's probably the guy who directs this. It's probably the guy who unironically uses absolute cinema. You know, like, this is the kind of person you're dealing with.
If he's the type where if you can't be popular, you're going to just start trying to really sell yourself more, and try and make some people think things about you. That's very much the impression I got. A lot of public myth making.
Yeah, I believe the term, like, here's the thing. I know nothing about him other than this movie, and he's directed a couple other things. Like, if I met him, I'd probably use the term film bro before you even meet the guy. Like, that's how he's coming across.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
They never make the greatest films ever. Hashtag just saying.
Yes. Well, I've learned I need to start, like, trying to emulate my film critic heroes. Maybe that's my issue, is I'm not, emulating people enough.
Here we go. One people we should not be emulating are the white colonial oppressors. So as long as we don't do that, we've learned our lesson from these three films, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
guys, let's do our best to not take over countries.
Yeah, before we round this up, because we've run on a bit, we have to do the thing. From best to worst, what order would you put these three films in?
Well, in order of what?
Best to,
what's the metric?
Just best to, whatever metric you would like.
For me, it's the order we discussed them in. I think the Drum followed by King Solomon's Mines. There's probably not much in it between those two, and then quite a gap, and then Edge of the World.
Jacob?
Well, I'm going to go most imperialistic to least, and I'm going to go Edge of the World, the Drum, and then King Solomon's Mines.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly close to Sam, but I might switch King Solomon.
Yeah, there's not a lot in it, really. It's
no, and I think I'd do that just because I had access to the colorized version, and it's like the acting's slightly better. I mean, Deborah Kerr's in it, and it's a little bit more fun and adventurous, but it's not the greatest movie ever, and there's not much in it. But yeah, Edge of the World is definitely the worst offender out of the three.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I guess that does it for this week's episode, but we'll find a way to include colonialism somewhere else. My dog just escaped from my house. Guys, until then, where can people find you?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Second Cup Pod Substack. Nothing new from me this week, but I will be seeing The Mandalorian and Grogu at the weekend, so I'll be reviewing that. So, look for that review soon.
You can hopefully find me nowhere, but I'm Cage's Metal in various places. Nothing new from me at the moment, though I am going to try in the next week or so to get to Obsession, at the very least, which has had plenty of good reviews. So I'm going to try and get to that at the very least.
Nice. And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. My review of The Wizard of the Kremlin is that thing needs an editor. And yeah, you can find us at Second Cut Pod. Email us at secondcutpod@gmail.com. Quentin Tarantino is wrong about Paul Dano, and that is it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.